The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Gatcombe Park, casting long shadows across Zara Tindall's study. She sat quietly at her grandmother's antique writing desk, a mahogany piece that had belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, its surface worn smooth by decades of royal correspondence. Before her lay an ornate wooden box, its brass hinges gleaming despite their age. Inside, nestled in faded velvet compartments, were treasures that most people would only see behind museum glass. Zara's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted a delicate diamond and sapphire brooch from its resting place. The Queen Mother's private collection had been left to her granddaughter with specific instructions, written in Elizabeth II's careful handwriting on cream-colored paper that now lay beside the jewelry box. The letter, sealed for over 2 years since her grandmother's passing, had only recently been opened on what would have been the Queen Mother's 125th birthday. These pieces were never meant for state occasions. The letter read in her grandmother's familiar script. They were the Queen Mother's most personal treasures, gifts from King George VI, pieces she wore during their private moments together. She always intended them to go to someone who would understand their true value lies not in their monetary worth, but in the love they represent. The weight of this responsibility settled heavily on Zara's shoulders. As the eldest granddaughter, she had always felt a special connection to the royal legacy, though she had chosen a life somewhat removed from the constant scrutiny of the crown. Her career as an Olympic equestrian had given her independence and purpose beyond her royal bloodline. Yet moments like these reminded her that some duties could never be escaped or ignored. She picked up her phone and scrolled to Catherine's contact information. The Princess of Wales had always been kind to her, treating her more like a sister than a distant royal relative. Catherine understood the delicate balance of royal duty and personal happiness, having navigated her own transformation from commoner to future queen with grace and dignity that had won over even the most skeptical critics. The decision to give these particular pieces to Catherine had not been made lightly. Zara had spent weeks considering her grandmother's wishes and the complex dynamics within the royal family. The Queen Mother had been especially fond of Catherine, often remarking privately how the young woman reminded her of herself in the early days of her marriage to King George VI. Both had entered the royal family as outsiders. Both had faced intense public scrutiny, and both had ultimately won the hearts of the British people through their genuine warmth and dedication. Zara thought back to the last conversation she had with her grandmother about Catherine. They had been sitting in the gardens at Balmoral, watching Catherine play with Prince George and Princess Charlotte while Prince William looked on with obvious adoration. The Queen had smiled, her eyes twinkling with approval. "She reminds me so much of my mother," the Queen had said softly. The Queen Mother always said that the best royal wives were those who brought love and laughter into these old walls. Catherine has done that, and more. Now, holding these precious pieces, Zara understood why her grandmother had chosen her as the keeper of this particular legacy. It was not about protocol or hierarchy, but about ensuring that these symbols of enduring love found their way to someone who would treasure them for the right reasons. The collection included several pieces that had never been publicly documented. There was a simple gold locket that King George VI had given to his wife on their first wedding anniversary, containing a tiny photograph of the two of them dancing at their wedding reception. A pair of pearl earrings that had been worn during intimate family dinners at Royal Lodge, never seen in any official photographs. Most precious of all was a modest diamond bracelet, each stone representing one of the years of the King and Queen Mother's marriage, commissioned secretly by George VI just months before his death. As Zara carefully examined each piece, she could almost feel the history flowing through them. These were not just jewels, but tangible connections to one of the most beloved love stories in modern royal history. The Queen Mother had worn these pieces during the darkest days of World War II, when she and her husband stood as symbols of British resilience and determination. They had adorned her during quiet moments of joy with her young daughters, during private celebrations that the public never saw. The responsibility of preserving this legacy felt enormous. Zara knew that her decision would ripple through the royal family in ways that were difficult to predict. Some would understand and approve. Others would undoubtedly question why these pieces had not gone to Camilla, who as queen consort might have seemed the more obvious choice according to traditional protocols. But Zara's grandmother had been very specific in her instructions. The letter continued, "I trust your judgment in this matter completely. You have always understood that our family's greatest strength lies not in our titles or our wealth, but in our ability to love and support one another through all of life's challenges. These pieces should go to someone who embodies that understanding." Zara's mind drifted to Catherine's children and how the Princess of Wales balanced her royal duties with motherhood. She had watched Catherine navigate the pressures of royal life while maintaining a sense of normalcy for her family, much as the Queen Mother had done decades earlier. There was something deeply appropriate about these private treasures finding their way to someone who understood that the most important royal duty was often the most invisible one, nurturing and protecting the next generation. The morning grew later, and Zara knew she needed to make the call soon. She had planned to invite Catherine for tea at Gatcombe Park, a casual setting where they could talk privately about the significance of these pieces. She wanted Catherine to understand not just what she was receiving, but why she had been chosen to receive it. As she lifted the phone, Zara felt the presence of her grandmother's guidance. Queen Elizabeth II had always been a master of long-term thinking, considering not just immediate implications, but how decisions would affect the monarchy for generations to come. By entrusting these particular pieces to Catherine through Zara, she was making a statement about continuity, about the values that truly mattered, and about the kind of future she envisioned for the royal family. The call connected, and Catherine's warm voice filled the quiet study. "Zara, how lovely to hear from you. How are you managing everything?" "I'm well, thank you. Actually, I was wondering if you might have time to come to Gatcombe for tea this week. There's something rather special I'd like to share with you." "Of course, I'd love to. Is everything all right?" Zara smiled, imagining Catherine's expression when she saw the treasures that awaited her. "More than all right. I think you'll find it quite meaningful." After they had arranged the details, Zara sat back in her chair and looked again at the jewelry box. Soon, these pieces would begin a new chapter in their remarkable journey through royal history. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she was honoring both her grandmother's wishes and the Queen Mother's memory in the most fitting way possible. The decision had been made with careful consideration of all the family dynamics at play, but ultimately, it came down to something much simpler. These pieces deserved to be with someone who would love and cherish them as the Queen Mother had done. In Catherine, they would find not just a caretaker, but someone who understood their true significance as symbols of enduring love, family devotion, and the quiet strength that had always been the monarchy's greatest asset. As afternoon approached, Zara carefully returned each piece to its velvet compartment, her heart full of anticipation for the moment when Catherine would first lay eyes on these extraordinary treasures and understand the depth of trust and affection they represented. Catherine's car crunched softly over the gravel drive leading to Gatcombe Park, the Gloucestershire countryside spreading out in gentle rolling hills around her. She had always loved visiting Zara, finding a sense of peace in the relaxed atmosphere that surrounded the Phillips family home. Here, away from the formal protocols of royal residences, she could simply be herself, a mother, a friend, a woman who happened to have married into the most famous family in the world. As she approached the Georgian manor house, Catherine noticed the careful attention to detail that made Gatcombe so special. The gardens were immaculately maintained, yet felt natural and welcoming, much like Zara herself. There was nothing ostentatious about the property, despite its obvious value and history. It represented the kind of royal life that Catherine had grown to appreciate most, one that honored tradition while remaining grounded in real relationships and genuine warmth. Zara greeted her at the front door with a warm embrace, but Catherine immediately sensed something different about her today. There was an excitement in Zara's eyes, mixed with what appeared to be nervous anticipation. They had known each other for over a decade now, and Catherine had learned to read the subtle shifts in Zara's demeanor that indicated when something significant was on her mind. "You look particularly radiant today," Catherine observed as they walked through the familiar hallways towards Zara's private study. "Country life clearly agrees with you." "Thank you, though I suspect I might look more nervous than radiant if you looked closely enough," Zara replied with a laugh that didn't quite mask her underlying tension. "I've been looking forward to this visit more than you might imagine." They settled into comfortable chairs by the large windows overlooking the gardens, where afternoon tea had been beautifully arranged on a small table between them. The china was elegant, but not overly formal, reflecting the relaxed nature of their friendship. Catherine poured the tea, noting how Zara's hand seemed slightly unsteady as she reached for her cup. "Zara, is everything truly all right? You seem quite on edge today." Zara set down her teacup and took a deep breath. "Catherine, do you remember the last time we spoke with Granny about family history? It was at Balmoral during that wonderful evening when all the cousins were together, sharing stories about growing up royal." Catherine nodded, her expression growing more attentive. That had been a magical evening, one of the last times they had all been together with Queen Elizabeth II. The Queen had been in particularly good spirits, regaling them with tales of her mother and the early days of her reign. There had been something almost prophetic about the way she had spoken that night, as if she were trying to pass along important lessons while she still could. "She spoke a lot about the Queen Mother that evening," Catherine recalled, "about how much she missed her guidance and wisdom." "Exactly. And she spoke about you as well, though you might not have noticed at the time." Zara's voice grew softer, more serious. "She said that watching you with your children reminded her of her own mother's approach to family life. She was quite moved by how naturally you had adapted to royal life while maintaining your own identity." Catherine felt a flush of warmth at this revelation. She had always wondered what the Queen truly thought of her, whether her efforts to honor royal traditions while staying true to herself had been noticed and appreciated. To know that she had reminded the Queen of the beloved Queen Mother was deeply touching. "There's something else you should know about that evening," Zara continued. "After everyone had gone to bed, Granny asked me to stay behind. She wanted to discuss something that she said was very important to her, something that had been weighing on her mind for quite some time." Zara rose from her chair and walked to her desk, where the ornate wooden box sat waiting. Catherine's eyes were immediately drawn to it. Even closed, it radiated an aura of significance and history. The wood was rich and dark with age, and the brass fittings caught the afternoon light in a way that suggested this was no ordinary jewelry box. "She entrusted me with this," Zara said, her voice filled with emotion as she lifted the box. "These are pieces that belong to the Queen Mother, not the famous ones that everyone knows, but her most private and personal treasures. The pieces she wore during intimate family moments, gifts from King George VI that were never meant for public display." Catherine's breath caught in her throat as Zara opened the box, revealing the extraordinary collection within. Even in the soft afternoon light, the pieces seemed to glow with an inner radiance that spoke of their exceptional quality and craftsmanship. But more than their obvious beauty, there was something deeply moving about seeing these intimate treasures that had been so carefully preserved and protected. "Zara, they're absolutely breathtaking," Catherine whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But surely these should go to someone more senior in the family hierarchy?" Zara carefully lifted the diamond and sapphire brooch from its velvet resting place. This was her favorite piece for family dinners at Royal Lodge. King George gave it to her on their 5th wedding anniversary, and she wore it every Christmas for the rest of his life, and then continued wearing it on special family occasions afterward. She handed the brooch to Catherine, who accepted it with trembling hands. The weight of it was surprising, not just its physical mass, but the emotional gravity of holding something so personal and meaningful. Catherine could almost imagine the Queen Mother fastening it to her dress before joining her family for an intimate celebration, choosing it not for its monetary value, but for the love it represented. There's a letter, Zara continued, retrieving the cream-colored paper from the desk. Granny's instructions were very specific. These pieces were to go to someone who would understand their true significance, someone who embodied the same values that made the Queen Mother so beloved. As Zara read selected passages from the letter aloud, Catherine felt tears begin to form in her eyes. The Queen's words painted a picture of careful consideration and deep affection, not just for the pieces themselves, but for the person chosen to receive them. To be compared to the Queen Mother, to be trusted with such precious family treasures, felt almost overwhelming. But what about Camilla? Catherine asked, her practical nature asserting itself despite her emotional response. As Queen Consort, surely she has the strongest claim to these pieces. Zara's expression grew more serious. That's exactly what makes this decision so significant. Granny could have left these to Camilla or arranged for them to become part of the Crown Jewels collection. Instead, she specifically chose to entrust them to me with instructions to give them to you. She wanted these pieces to go to someone who would treasure them for personal rather than ceremonial reasons. Catherine examined the pearl earrings that Zara placed in her hands next. They were elegantly simple, the kind of pieces that could be worn with anything, but would always add a touch of understated sophistication. She could imagine the Queen Mother wearing them during quiet family breakfasts, or while reading bedtime stories to young Elizabeth and Margaret. I don't know what to say, Catherine admitted. This feels like such an enormous responsibility. These pieces are living history. That's exactly why Granny chose you, Zara replied. She trusted your judgment and your understanding of what these pieces represent. They're not meant to sit in a vault or be displayed only on the most formal occasions. They were made to be worn by someone who appreciates their emotional significance. As Catherine continued to examine each piece, Zara shared the stories behind them. The gold locket that contained the tiny wedding photograph, still perfectly preserved after all these years. The modest diamond bracelet that represented each year of a love story that had captured the world's imagination. Each piece had its own history, its own collection of moments and memories that had shaped the royal family's understanding of love and commitment. The Queen Mother always said that the most important jewels were the ones that connected us to the people we love, Zara explained. These pieces were her connection to King George, and now they can be your connection to that legacy of devoted partnership and family love. Catherine felt the full weight of this gift settling around her. It was more than jewelry, more than family heirlooms. It was a passing of the torch, a recognition of her place in the royal family's emotional hierarchy that went far beyond protocol or precedence. To be trusted with these treasures meant that she had earned something that could not be granted by marriage or title. She had earned the deep personal trust of the royal family's matriarch. The afternoon sun was beginning to set as they continued to explore the collection, each piece revealing new layers of history and meaning. Catherine realized that accepting these gifts would change something fundamental about her position in the family. She would become not just the keeper of beautiful objects, but the custodian of the Queen Mother's most intimate legacy, responsible for ensuring that the love story they represented continued to inspire future generations. As she held the last piece, a delicate diamond flower pin that the Queen Mother had worn to her first royal garden party as queen, Catherine knew that her answer could only be yes. These treasures deserved to be cherished by someone who understood their true value, and she would dedicate herself to being worthy of the trust that Queen Elizabeth II had placed in her. The news traveled through the royal household with the swift efficiency that characterized all information within palace walls, though it took nearly a week for the full implications to become clear. Catherine had worn the Queen Mother's pearl earrings to a private family dinner at Windsor Castle, and eagle-eyed courtiers had immediately noticed something different about her appearance. The earrings were exquisite, clearly antique, and unmistakably familiar to anyone who had spent years studying royal jewelry collections. Lady Susan Hussey, one of the Queen's former ladies-in-waiting and a walking encyclopedia of royal history, had been the first to identify them. She had approached Catherine quietly after dinner, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "My dear, those are beautiful earrings," she had said with the diplomatic skill that had served her throughout decades of royal service. "They remind me very much of pieces I remember the Queen Mother wearing during private family occasions." Catherine's response had been gracious but deliberately vague. "They were a gift from someone very dear to me. I'm honored to be able to wear them." But Lady Susan was far too experienced in the subtle communications of royal life to miss the significance of what she was witnessing. By the following morning, discreet inquiries were being made, and by afternoon, the basic facts had become clear to those in the highest circles of royal service. The Queen Mother's private collection, pieces that had been presumed lost or absorbed into the general royal jewelry archive, had somehow found their way to the Princess of Wales. The reaction within different segments of the royal household varied dramatically. Among the older staff members who had served the Queen Mother directly, there was a sense of approval and even relief. Many of them had worried that these deeply personal pieces might disappear into storage or be treated as mere artifacts rather than the treasure mementos they truly were. To see them worn by someone who clearly understood their emotional significance felt like a vindication of the Queen Mother's memory. But in other quarters, particularly among those more concerned with protocol and precedence, questions were beginning to arise. How had these pieces, which many had assumed would naturally pass to the most senior royal ladies, ended up with Catherine? More importantly, why had no one in the immediate royal family been consulted about their disposition? Queen Camilla first learned of the situation through her own lady-in-waiting, who had heard whispers from colleagues at Windsor. The news came as she was preparing for an afternoon engagement with a children's literacy charity, one of her favorite causes. She had been in excellent spirits, looking forward to reading to a group of young students, when the carefully worded update about Catherine's new jewelry had been delivered. "Ma'am, there have been some observations about the Princess of Wales wearing what appear to be pieces from the late Queen Mother's private collection," her aide had said delicately. "Perhaps this is something that might benefit from clarification?" Camilla's initial reaction was one of confusion rather than anger. She had always prided herself on maintaining excellent relationships with all family members, and the idea that such significant family pieces might have been distributed without her knowledge seemed almost impossible. Surely there had been some misunderstanding, some simple explanation that would resolve any apparent irregularities. But as more details emerged over the following days, the situation became increasingly difficult to dismiss as a mere miscommunication. Catherine had been seen wearing different pieces from the collection on several occasions. The sapphire brooch at a private family christening, the modest diamond bracelet during a quiet dinner with William's cousins. Each sighting confirmed that she had access to a substantial portion of the Queen Mother's most personal treasures. The emotional impact of this realization was more complex than Camilla had anticipated. She had genuinely never expected to inherit every significant piece from previous royal generations. The royal collection was vast, and many items had specific historical or sentimental connections that made them appropriate for particular family members. But these pieces were different. They represented the Queen Mother's most intimate moments with King George VI, the private side of one of the most beloved royal marriages in modern history. As Queen Consort, Camilla had worked tirelessly to honor the traditions and relationships that defined her new role. She had been particularly conscious of respecting the memory of Queen Elizabeth II and her mother, often wearing pieces that paid subtle tribute to their legacy. To discover that such significant family treasures had been passed to Catherine without any consultation felt like more than an oversight. It felt like a deliberate message about her place in the family hierarchy. The situation was further complicated by the timing. Camilla had recently been working with palace historians to catalog and preserve important pieces from previous reigns, ensuring that future generations would understand and appreciate the full scope of royal heritage. The discovery that major pieces had been distributed outside this official process raised questions about what other family treasures might have been handled informally. Her husband, King Charles, was initially reluctant to address the situation directly. His relationship with his extended family had always been complex, and he preferred to handle sensitive family matters through quiet conversations rather than formal protocols. But as the questions multiplied and the potential for misunderstanding grew, it became clear that some form of clarification would be necessary. "Perhaps we should invite Zara for tea," Charles suggested during one of their private evening conversations. "I suspect there's more to this story than we're currently aware of, and she's always been remarkably straightforward about family matters." Meanwhile, Catherine found herself in an increasingly delicate position. She had accepted the jewelry with deep gratitude and a genuine understanding of its significance, but she had not anticipated how quickly news of her new pieces would spread through royal circles. The attention made her acutely aware of the complex dynamics at play, and she began to worry that her acceptance of the gift might have inadvertently caused problems for others in the family. She discussed the situation with William during one of their evening walks through the grounds of their Norfolk home. The privacy of their own estate allowed them to speak freely about family dynamics in a way that was impossible within the more formal royal residences. "Do you think we should have declined the gift?" Catherine asked as they paused beside the small lake that reflected the setting sun. "I never wanted to cause any family tensions." William's response was thoughtful and measured. "Zara wouldn't have offered them if she didn't believe it was the right thing to do. Granny was very specific in her instructions, and she had excellent reasons for making the choices she made. But perhaps we should reach out to make sure everyone understands the situation properly." The weight of unspoken family politics hung in the evening air between them. Both Catherine and William were acutely aware that their every action was scrutinized not just by the public, but by various factions within the royal family itself. The jewelry gift, innocent as it was in its origins, had the potential to become a symbol of larger questions about precedence, respect, and the informal power structures that operated alongside official protocols. As news of the situation continued to circulate, other family members began to weigh in with their own perspectives. Princess, and ever practical and direct, was reportedly pleased that the pieces had gone to someone who would actually wear and appreciate them rather than letting them languish in storage. She had never been particularly interested in elaborate jewelry herself, but she understood and respected the emotional significance of family heirlooms. Prince Edward and Sophie, meanwhile, maintained their characteristic diplomacy, neither criticizing nor endorsing the arrangement, but making it clear that they trusted the judgment of both Queen Elizabeth II and Zara in handling such matters. Their response reflected their general approach to family dynamics, supportive but careful not to take sides in potentially divisive situations. The ripple effects extended beyond the immediate royal family to the broader network of courtiers, advisors, and staff members who helped maintain the complex machinery of modern monarchy. Some saw the situation as a refreshing return to the personal relationships and individual judgments that had characterized royal gift-giving in earlier eras. Others worried about the precedent it might set for handling other significant family possessions in the future. As the days passed and the initial shock began to settle, it became clear that this situation would require careful handling from all parties involved. The jewelry itself was beautiful and historically significant, but its real importance lay in what it represented about family relationships, respect for the past, and the delicate balance between personal affection and official protocol that defined life within the royal family. The stage was being set for conversations that would need to address not just the immediate question of the jewelry's disposition, but the larger issues of how such important family decisions should be made and communicated in the future. Everyone involved wanted to honor the Queen Mother's memory and Queen Elizabeth II's final wishes, but they also needed to ensure that family harmony was maintained and that appropriate respect was shown to all members of the royal household. The invitation to Highgrove came on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the informal warmth that characterized King Charles's personal communications, but carrying an unmistakable note of royal authority. Zara read the handwritten note twice, recognizing both the affection and the underlying concern in her uncle's words. He suggested a family tea for the following weekend, mentioning that it had been too long since they had all gathered for a proper conversation. Zara understood immediately that this was about the jewelry. The past 2 weeks had been a delicate dance of whispered conversations and careful observations throughout the royal family's various circles. She had watched from a distance as the situation developed, knowing that eventually there would need to be a reckoning, a moment when all the unspoken questions could be addressed openly and honestly. She arrived at Highgrove on a crisp autumn afternoon, the Gloucestershire countryside painted in brilliant shades of gold and amber. The organic gardens that Charles had lovingly cultivated for decades were at their seasonal peak, offering a peaceful backdrop for what she knew would be an emotionally charged conversation. As she walked up the familiar path to the house, she carried with her a folder containing photocopies of Queen Elizabeth II's letter, along with detailed documentation about each piece in the collection. King Charles greeted her warmly, his manner suggesting that whatever concerns existed about the situation, they had not diminished his personal affection for her. They were joined by Queen Camilla, whose grace and composure impressed Zara, even as she sensed the underlying tension that had prompted this gathering. Catherine and William arrived shortly afterward, and Zara could see in Catherine's eyes the same mixture of gratitude and concern that had been weighing on her own mind. The conversation began gently with updates about children and upcoming engagements, but gradually moved toward the matter at hand. It was King Charles who finally broached the subject directly, his tone careful but not accusatory. "Zara, we've been hearing some interesting observations about family jewelry appearing in unexpected places," he said with a slight smile. "Perhaps you could help us understand the full story?" Zara had prepared for this moment, but she still felt her heart racing as she retrieved the folder she had brought. "I think it's best if I show you exactly what Granny wrote," she said, pulling out the carefully preserved letter. "Her instructions were very specific, and I want everyone to understand that I followed them precisely." As she read Queen Elizabeth II's words aloud, the atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. The letter's warmth and specificity made it clear that this had not been a casual or thoughtless decision, but rather the result of careful consideration by the late queen. Her reasoning was laid out clearly. These pieces were meant to go to someone who would cherish them for their emotional significance rather than their ceremonial value. She specifically mentioned Catherine. Zara continued, looking toward the Princess of Wales. "Granny wrote that watching you with your children reminded her of the Queen Mother's approach to family life, and that these pieces should go to someone who embodied those same values of love and devotion." Queen Camilla listened intently as the letter was read, her expression gradually softening as she began to understand the thought process behind the late queen's decision. The pain of feeling excluded from such an important family moment was real, but she was also deeply moved by Queen Elizabeth II's evident care in choosing the right recipient for such precious items. "The Queen was always extraordinarily thoughtful about these matters," Camilla said quietly. "I can see her reasoning, even if I admit I was initially surprised by the arrangement." Catherine, who had been unusually quiet throughout the conversation, finally spoke up. "I want everyone to know that I had no idea about any of this beforehand. When Zara invited me to tea, I had no notion of what she planned to share. If my accepting these pieces has caused any family discord, I'm more than willing to reconsider the situation." The offer was made sincerely, but King Charles immediately shook his head. "That won't be necessary, Catherine. Mother's wishes were clear, and she had excellent reasons for making the choices she made. The issue isn't whether her decision was right. It's ensuring that we all understand and support what she intended." William had remained largely silent during the discussion, but now he leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps what we need is a better understanding of how such decisions will be handled in the future. This situation arose because Granny made arrangements that weren't widely known until after the fact." Zara nodded, appreciating William's practical approach to what could have become a purely emotional confrontation. That's entirely fair. I should have consulted more broadly before acting on Granny's instructions. I was so focused on honoring her wishes that I didn't consider how the timing and communication might affect others. Queen Camilla reached across the table and took Catherine's hand, a gesture that surprised everyone in the room. My dear, I want you to know that any initial concern I had was not about you personally. You've always been nothing but gracious and thoughtful in all our interactions. This was about process and communication, not about whether you deserve such beautiful pieces. The emotional weight of this moment was evident to everyone present. Camilla's graciousness in addressing the situation directly, despite her own feelings of having been overlooked, demonstrated the kind of mature leadership that had characterized her approach to her royal role. Catherine's visible relief and gratitude showed how much the family's unity meant to her. I think it would be helpful if we all understood more about these particular pieces, King Charles suggested. Zara, could you tell us about the collection and its history? For the next hour, Zara shared the stories behind each piece, describing not just their provenance, but their emotional significance in the Queen Mother's life. She spoke about the locket with the tiny wedding photograph, the pearl earrings worn during intimate family moments, the diamond bracelet that represented each year of a great love story. As she talked, it became clear to everyone why Queen Elizabeth II had chosen these particular pieces for this particular recipient. They're not state jewels, Zara explained. They're love letters written in diamonds and pearls, meant to be worn by someone who understands that their true value lies in the emotions they represent. Catherine listened to these stories with growing appreciation for the responsibility she had accepted. Each piece carried not just beauty, but meaning, not just history, but hope for the future. She began to understand that Queen Elizabeth II had entrusted her with more than jewelry. She had entrusted her with the continuation of a legacy of devoted partnership that had defined the royal family's best moments. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation gradually shifted from explanation and justification to planning and inclusion. Queen Camilla suggested that Catherine might want to have the pieces professionally photographed and documented, ensuring that their history would be preserved for future generations. King Charles offered to connect her with palace historians who could provide additional context about the Queen Mother's life and times. Perhaps most importantly, William added, we should think about how Catherine can share these pieces appropriately. They shouldn't be hidden away, but they also shouldn't be displayed without proper context. The suggestion led to a discussion about future family gatherings where the pieces might be worn and appreciated by younger generations. Catherine's children, along with their cousins, could learn about their great-great-grandmother through these tangible connections to the past. The jewelry could become educational tools as well as beautiful accessories, helping to keep the Queen Mother's memory alive in practical and meaningful ways. As the sun began to set over Highgrove's gardens, the family had reached not just an understanding, but a genuine appreciation for the wisdom behind Queen Elizabeth II's decision. The initial tension had given way to recognition that the late queen had chosen well, selecting someone who would honor both the pieces themselves and the legacy they represented. I think Mother will be pleased with how we've handled this, King Charles observed as they prepared to part ways. She always valued honest conversation and family unity over rigid protocol. Queen Camilla's final words to Catherine captured the grace that had characterized the entire afternoon. Wear them with joy, my dear. They were meant to bring happiness, and I can't think of anyone better suited to continue that tradition. As Zara drove home through the darkening countryside, she felt a profound sense of relief and satisfaction. The difficult conversation had taken place. The family had found its way to understanding and unity, and the Queen Mother's precious legacy was secure in caring hands. Queen Elizabeth II's final gift to her family had been not just beautiful jewelry, but an opportunity to demonstrate the love and mutual support that had always been their greatest strength. The story of the Queen Mother's jewelry had become, in its own way, a new chapter in the ongoing story of the royal family itself. A reminder that the most important treasures were not those that could be locked away in vaults, but those that continued to bring people together in love and understanding across the generations.